All right, we got my guy Brandon Longtime, as many people know him, or Brandon Long on today. The conversation I'm super excited for. It feels like every time we get together, it's a podcast episode in itself. It's just not recorded. So just recently, I think the biggest thing going on right now is this new Pivot drop, as y'all can see. So we got the Pivot gear, and it's absolutely comfortable. We got it here and here. And the reason I want to do that is because what Brandon stands for, we're going to dive into it more, but he's just an awesome guy, someone I look up to as a mentor, and what the brand he's building is just so inspirational, and I know he's doing it for like the absolute right reasons. So go cop a shirt, not to plug him too much, but he's just an absolute awesome guy, so I'm excited for this conversation.
I appreciate that. That was quite an intro. Yeah, dude, it's been a journey first and foremost. Since I've met you, a lot of growth, just from the baby Palmer that I met at the run club, to where you're at right now. It's just awesome to see what you're doing. This podcast is dope. So it's an honor to be here as one of the guests. I'm excited about this conversation. Like you said, we always get together and pass by and feel like, we should have been hitting record somewhere. There should be cameras somewhere at some point, because we just get to, different levels of, whatever we're going through and things like that. Even when we worked out that one time, I think we talked majority of the time. Yeah. And so, it's good to finally sit down and get this, kind of content recorded.
I'm your host, Paul McCarran, and the whole thing with the process, it's the process of me gaining knowledge and gaining wisdom. My guests are going to provide the knowledge and the wisdom, and I'm doing work at the same time to gain knowledge and wisdom. Process of 2 to 3 years down the line, now I'm providing knowledge and wisdom along with the guest. Welcome to Process Podcast. Yeah, that long form, deep. And it's like, obviously you don't want to be recording everyday life, but I think some of the conversations we've already had just between us could influence and help so many people. Sure. And I just remember, if you remember, the first time I met Brandon, so it was through his run club, which we'll talk about for sure, but the Tampa hybrid run club, and it was through Hayden. Hayden invited me, but we ran for the whole first time I came, and we talked about his journey of bodybuilding, what I was doing, want to do the podcast. It wasn't even a thing. I think I was planning on maybe starting the other podcast that I did, and it was just we were talking about life and his journey from bodybuilding to just self-improvement in a sense, and this hybrid culture. So I guess first thing we'll just start off is, we'll dive into bodybuilding, because I think you give that a lot of credit for shaping the person that you are today and where it's led you. So how did you get into bodybuilding? What led you to that? And then, what started that?
Yeah, so it's actually very interesting, the whole process of getting into bodybuilding, because I never even understood or watched bodybuilding. I didn't know what it was. I'd never been to a show before. And my first show that I ever went to was my own. And so I had no idea what I was getting into, but it was the time of COVID. I lost my job as a bartender during that time. And, I just had no real structure in my life. I was kind of just partying my way through COVID for 5, 6, 7 months when people weren't doing anything. And so I needed some structure in my life. I kind of was dwindling. And my sister's boyfriend was a bodybuilding coach. And he was like, how would you like to do a bodybuilding show? And I was like, I don't know. I have no idea.
I was 4 nights a week.
Yeah, I really was, dude. I really was. I was drinking a lot. I was partying a lot. And I was like, dude, I don't know. What will happen? Yeah. He's like, you'll get shredded. I was like, okay, cool. Let's do it. I've never been shredded before. I've always a bigger, beefier kid. So I was like, I want to get shredded to the bone, and with some guidance, let's do it. And in 16 weeks, I lost 42 pounds and got shredded. Ooh. I was peeled. And that structure made me unlock a new level of confidence in myself, that when I stuck to it, I'd never stuck to something like that in my life outside of, sports as a kid, right? Going high school, sticking to your practices and your games and regimens like that. But this was self-induced discipline. This was nobody's watching. There's no team here.
It's not one cheap bite, not cheap meal. It's every little thing.
Exactly. And so when I went through that whole 16-week process without a single error, I followed it to a T, and I stepped on stage and I got second place. I lost to a guy named Ross Flanagan. He's an amazing bodybuilder. He's a professional Olympian now.
Oh, wow.
But when I stepped on stage, I proved to myself something that I didn't think that was going to happen. And I unlocked a whole nother level of confidence by sticking to the plan, following through with my actions. And from there, when I was done with that, I was like, I feel like I can do literally anything. I felt invincible when I was done with that, not only because of the whole bodybuilding process, like itself, of like, not eating food. You're actually, deriving your body of nutrients that it needs
to look good.
So like you're basically pulling the necessities of survival from your body and still surviving. So it gives you that like, that confidence that you can do really, really hard things, legitimately things that your body requires to stay alive. And you can pull yourself away from that, whether it's nutrients, sleep, things of that nature. And so that whole bodybuilding process just gave me an overwhelming amount of confidence to where I was like, whatever I do, like I can do.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I've talked about it on this podcast, but it's how I relate to 75 hard. It's like you make this deep, like hard promise to yourself. And I think fulfilling that promise over a long-winded period of time is the biggest thing to build that like confidence. Because for me, like, I was lacking sleep. I had a job, like, all these things. But at the end of those 75 days, the biggest thing that changed was that I fulfilled that promise to myself. And so I think, let me know if that like kind of resonates, but it's that promise that you made to yourself. Like, I'm going to hop on stage, give it my all and listen to this coach. And then you didn't falter once. And it's like knowing you didn't even slip up once is huge. Or like, so I think that's the biggest thing you took from that. And then, okay, so you get second on stage. What's next? What's going through your mind?
Well, just to touch on that point is it's commitment, and that's what it is. It's seeing a commitment all the way through. And you don't realize, when you are younger and you're growing up and you probably don't have a lot of dialogue going on about commitment or responsibility and things of those nature, you don't realize that when, you're trying to eat better and then you have, you go out or you're trying to, get in shape and be consistent with the gym, but then you go out with your friends on the weekend or you're drinking a few times a week, you don't realize how you're cheating on yourself consistently. When you're consistently going against what you committed to yourself, you don't realize how damaging that is. So when I was able to fulfill the commitment on the other side, I didn't recognize, or I wasn't aware of how much positive output that was going to give me. I didn't realize that I hadn't fulfilled a commitment to myself like that.
Yeah.
Probably in a very, very long time. And it just kind of like shot a boost of energy and confidence that I was lacking in my life. So that, just to touch on that point, it's like you said, the promise. A lot of men struggle with commitment. A lot of men struggle with following through with what they're going to say they're going to do, loyalty, things of that nature. And it's because it's so easy and you don't recognize it to go off track. When you make commitments, I'm going to get my financial, situation under control this year, and it doesn't happen. You're cheated on yourself. You didn't follow through. Little things like that.
Small things that build up too. It's like, oh, should I go grab this dinner out or not? And that piles up to I grabbed that dinner. Well, now let me go get this coffee.
Yeah, dude, you tell yourself you're saving money and then you go and buy something, like you just cheated on yourself. You cheated on what you just committed to. You wouldn't tell your partner, or your girlfriend or whatever, your wife, that I'm not going to, talk to other women and then do it and not feel bad about it. Yeah. That's the thing is that we don't feel bad about our behavior anymore when it comes to things that we
self-respect.
When we commit to it ourselves, we don't feel bad about it. But when it happens to other, it's commitments to other people, we feel bad. People don't feel bad about cheating on themselves, and that's the problem. Wow. And when I was in the bodybuilding prep, I was so scared to cheat on myself. I was so scared to cheat on myself that I didn't. And seeing it all the way through and proving to myself that I could follow through with that commitment was night and day.
Yeah, and I think like one thing that plays into this is like identity being something that can really hold you back. And what happened over those 16 weeks is you changed your identity, and that you were the person that did hard things, that you were the person that got out of your comfort zone by like, sticking to the disciplines that you put in place. But a lot of people, if they don't make that drastic measure of like that's why I think these things like bodybuilding shows or 75 hard or some sort of like, I'm not a big fan of resolutions, but like some sort of like thing that gets you on track for a long period of time, it actually changes your identity. But if people don't change their identity, it's super easy to get roped back into the thing that prevents them, because it's like, oh, what's one more whatever. And at the end of the day, I've read a lot of books about self-sabotage. And if your identity is someone who doesn't go to the gym, then your subconscious mind is going to want you to go eat that cookie. Like, as much as like, I think there's a great thing with balance, but if you're overweight and your subconscious mind wants you to eat that cookie, you're going to go do it as self-sabotage, because your identity is still the person who's overweight, not the person who's in shape.
Sure.
So it's like, it's that kind of combination of those disciplines and changing your identity over time. Mm-hmm. So I think, no, dude, that's sweet. And I like from then, because commitment, I think, is a big thing in your life and something that you've been working very hard towards in the last 4 or 5, probably since that time.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work, but it also reflects to all areas of life. So it goes from self-commitment to now commitment to other people, friendships, relationships. So have you seen that commitment transfer to other relationships?
Yeah, it quite literally transformed my whole life, because once I realized that I could, kind of stick with something like that and learn and follow through, I was like, what else in my life could I commit to and follow through with, right? Whether that was learning a new skill, whether that was starting a business, whether it was a relationship, friendships, even me showing up here at 9:30, I was here at 9:40, but even like showing up, here on time to be here for this, like, that's to me like important. Things like this weren't important to me before.
Yeah.
Little commitments like that, right? That it was like, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be there, right? Me and you, we worked out one time and you showed up late, you remember?
Yeah.
Right. And it was, I didn't care about it. Like, it wasn't like a big deal, but those are the type of things that you felt bad about.
Oh yeah.
You felt really bad. I used to not feel bad about those things. And that really impacted my ability to create quality friendships and deeper connections, because people, I was the party friend. I would show up and like I'd be great energy, a good time, but people weren't viewing me because I wasn't viewing myself this way, as somebody that did what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, or could be there when they asked him to be.
Sure. I wasn't reliable in that sense, in that I didn't realize, how damaging that was for my view on myself and where I was going in my life. So if I didn't have this perception of, I'm this guy that does what I said I'm going to do, I'm not going to really commit to a whole lot of, hard things, because I'm not somebody that does that.
And they're scary. So if you don't believe you're that person, you're not going to be able to do them.
So that bodybuilding thing was the first step. And then after that, I was around a bunch of bodybuilding coaches, and I was on this bodybuilding podcast as well as a co-host.
Yeah.
With Justin Mahaley. Forever grateful for that, opportunity to be a guest and then a co-host. And then I was, doing all the editing for it, uploading and things like that. So I had a job. I got a job, like a real job after that wasn't, that wasn't tied to something that I, wasn't going to do long term, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this was more of a job that, I wanted to do and I was excited to be a part of, that was also helping me grow, if that makes sense. And
the podcast was.
The podcast was.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was learning a bunch about bodybuilding on the podcast, which gave me a bunch of confidence and knowledge to start bodybuilding coaching. So from that step, I started coaching. And then again, same thing, commitment to these people that I'm going to help them, get into the best shape of their lives. And I will never forget the one girl that signed up with me for the very first time. Her name was Jackie Castillo. Never forget it. She signed up actually before I started my coaching, before I launched it. It was in my bio, and I had been posting fitness content and stuff like that. And I think I had 2,000 followers. And this was before social media was what it is now. When I was on social media, if you had 10,000 followers, you were big time
influencer.
You were big time. If you got 1,000 likes on a post, it was holy crap, that is crazy.
Yeah.
And so I was in the social media game very early, and I liked it. So I had posted some things about fitness and whatnot that I'm getting ready to start coaching, and this girl clicks on my bio and signs up. signs are up right away, right? And so I'm like, I just got a call booked, and I haven't even launched my coaching yet.
Yeah.
And Justin Mahaley and my sister were both coaches, and they were dating at the time. And I will never forget this. This is part of like that hard thing that's like super uncomfortable. The phone call that I had with my first ever, client that I'm about to have, it's an onboarding, type of call, or discovery call. And we're in the car together. Justin's in the front seat. He has like 700 athletes under his team. He's been doing this for like 5 years at this point. My sister has, a grip of athletes as well. She's been doing it, with him and whatnot. And I'm in the car getting ready to take my first ever call. And, they already have been doing this they've had a ton of reps at this. So I'm in the back seat getting ready to take my call, and I'm like so nervous because I can't avoid like
people's ears.
I can't avoid them listening. I was super uncomfortable with them being, right there because I know that this is my first call.
And they've been doing it. So you feel like they could be like, oh, what is he doing?
Exactly. And I told them, I was like, hey, I'm about to take my first call back here. If you guys don't mind, can you guys just, I basically want to say, can you guys put earplugs in basically? But no, I took the call and it went well, and they gave me some pointers afterwards, which was great, but it was super uncomfortable. But again, sitting in that uncomfortable position and then proving to myself that I can do it. And then, if she signed up or not wasn't really the outcome.
Either way you learn.
Either way, it was going to be, beneficial for me. But at that time, she signed up, and it was like a hit. It was like
build some confidence.
It was like confidence, dopamine with the sign up, and I was like, wow, like that was great. And then I helped her get in shape, and then from there I grew my roster. I kept posting people online, and that's kind of the next step in my journey was getting into fitness coaching.
Dude, that's so cool because like she just catches your bio, and it's like something I've been hearing a lot. I met this guy named David Solomon at the coffee shop, and I followed him on Instagram. He's like an inspirational speaker, but he used a text in the Bible, but the one thing he said was like God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So when he calls you, you might not be qualified, but he'll qualify you when he calls you. And that's just like a perfect example. Like you probably, when she hit your bio, you probably were like, what is going on? Like, I don't have a program, I don't have anything, but it's like he was called, like, this is what you're going to be doing for however long you do that. And now, you got the first sale, and then you start learning. And it's like, because I think that's the biggest thing when you're starting something is you're never going to feel qualified to do it. Like me talking on this podcast, like I didn't really feel like I didn't know how to use cameras. I didn't know how to use the audio interface. I didn't know how to edit the videos. And it's like, but I figured it out step by step, and it's like a lot less overwhelming when you get into it. So I think that's the biggest step is just starting somewhere. And maybe like for you, it was the first sales call went great and that was your plan, but someone else, it might be 50 of them that all go the wrong way. But if you're called to something, like just because it's not working right away, it's like you're going to be qualified because God's called you to do it.
Absolutely.
So,
I think what went well for me on that first sales call was posting on social media. So it wasn't like this was a cold call or somebody was just looking for a coach and like I got them to sign up, right? It was somebody that had been following me for probably at least a year at this point. I was active on social media. I talked a lot about my past. I talked about where I came from, how I got in shape. I was very open about sharing those experiences. So I already had a brand.
Yeah, I already had a brand.
She already knew me.
A year of like, I know Brandon, I want to be coached like he has coaching.
Sure, exactly. He's like, wow, he finally has this offer. I want to be, somebody that's coached by him. And that's kind of like where my mind went. It was like, okay, if I can keep building my brand, I will keep building my business naturally. It'll keep building itself. If I keep sharing, experiences, if I keep sharing, things that a lot of people are nervous to talk about, right? And I still post about those things.
Yeah.
I still talk about
stories are great. Like I love his stories. I've been off social media a little bit for the last month, but every story I would click on, I would just like be watching, and it would just be like value. And it's like stuff that not many people post because a lot of men, especially men, are like scared to be vulnerable. They're scared to put down their walls in a sense, I think. And you do that. And so people are able to actually see life change because they can relate.
Yeah. And then when people can relate to that, it's easy to connect with. You can't connect with people. It's hard to connect with people that aren't vulnerable, right? You can only connect on surface level things, like monetary things, on the very, very top things. It's like, cool, we can talk about sports and we can talk about like, where
business
we traveled and
money.
and stuff like that. But I want to know Palmer, like I want to know like why you are the way you are, where you come from. And like, we've been able to do that, in our short friendship, in which I really value. Right. 100%. And I think that's very important in a lot of dynamics in life, whether that is business, whether that is relationship, or, with yourself, things like that. Being able to be vulnerable will help you connect with yourself and other people, and it'll help grow everything in your life by proxy.
I want to dive back into the social media in a little bit, but that kind of leads me to a point. Like, so now you've built this discipline, you've made this commitment, you fulfilled it to yourself. And now like there's a lot of stuff like becoming that person who can be vulnerable, who can be authentic to one, not just like others in person, but two, on social media, which takes it to a new extent. That takes a lot of like growth, self-reflection. And I'll tell you what, from my experience at least, those two things, growth, self-reflection, any of that stuff, self-improvement, is not fun, especially when you're deep diving into your past. So how did you go about that? Like someone who's like, man, I want to be able to be vulnerable, but I can't be vulnerable to friends. I can't be vulnerable in relationships. Because I've been in that spot. I did the work. It's brutal. But how do you start that process out, and what that looked like for you?
I think the biggest thing in any problem, let's call it a problem, is understanding why it's a problem. What it is that's causing you that you can't be, causing you to not be vulnerable, right? So majority of the time, it's fear, right? Fear of being seen for who you really are and what you really are, what you've been through, and things of that nature, right? And so if you could just break down the problem, you can solve it. You can't solve a problem that you don't understand, right? So the feeling of fear that comes up, normally people are just like, I don't like that feeling. It gives me anxiety, and I'm not gonna keep doing what's giving me that, right? But if you're able to actually just say like, okay, why am I getting a little bit anxious talking about my past right now, or what I've been through? Oh, I'm a little bit scared. Why am I scared? Like, what am I scared of? Right? And if you can just say like, oh, I'm scared of, Palmer knowing that I was, XYZ, right? And then
that he won't like me for that.
And then you ask, well, what would happen if he did know that? And then what? And I kind of use that then what scenario in these situations, and it always comes out to be something that doesn't matter. So it's like,
or it might never happen.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, I share this about myself, then what? And people don't like me, then what? Then they don't sign up with my coaching, then what? Then what I'm saying?
I don't want to coach. Yeah.
It's like then I get a new job, then what? Then you know what I mean? Then then I get it's like you keep using that then what scenario, and you realize that no matter what you do, in the hindsight of everything, it's going to be okay. Like the result isn't going to be I share this and my life gets taken from me. Yeah. Right. It
feels like that sometimes though. It really can.
It can feel
when you let that fear
depths.
build and like when you give it so much meaning, I think.
Right. Yeah. And so to your point is to get more comfortable with the fear. So like that's how you can really start to feel a little bit more comfortable sharing and being yourself and being authentic and not having to worry about what everybody thinks or how they're going to respond to you being Palmer.
Yeah.
Right. Is to be okay with fear. We have this, that the fear for a reason, right? It's not because we're never supposed to experience it. And I think that's something that we're kind of wired as when we're young is like, if you're scared, run. If you're scared, get to high ground, whatever it is, like you were taught or whatever it is, like is in your nature. Fear is not always something to run from. It's something that is always going to be present in your life. And if you let it drive your life, if it's in the driver's seat of your life and you're in the passenger seat, you're not in control of your life. You're not heading the directions in which you should be because you have your buddy fear driving your car.
Yeah.
So you gotta learn how to put, I'll never forget when I heard this, you got to learn how to put fear in the passenger seat because it's always going to be there. And you have to be the one driving your car.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it's like fear is like the tactic that the devil uses to kind of like push you away from the things that you want to pursue or whatever. And like, as a person of faith, it's like God's the person, like he pushes the devil away. He'll push that fear away. So for me, it's like I dive deeper into my faith when those fears come up. And so like the word is the truth. And so using those lies or those fears that the devil tells you, like the fear of that I'll never make enough money or I'll be financially stressed, you'll go looking in the truths in the word of where it talks about like financial prosperity or like that God has good plans for us. Like I was reading Jeremiah 29:11-13 this morning. And it's like, for me, anxiety is big. And so you start to memorize these scriptures to combat those, like Philippians 4:6-7, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And it's like, then you start enrooting those truths of the word in everyday life. And it's like those fears that used to take over, you can combat them really quickly. And I think I was talking to my mentor about that, and it's actually, I'm losing the term, but it's cognitive therapy in a sense. And it's like, you're now, every time those thoughts come up, you have positive thoughts associated around it and the truth of the word. So that's where I've been able to, but I like where you said identifying that fear. So for me, maybe I can just share a little bit. I've shared a little bit of this, but where that fear rooted from and how I got over it was, one, I'd look at the person in the mirror and I didn't like that person, right? And so that's like, off the bat, if you don't like that person, how do you expect other people to like that person? But I guess my fear was that if I'm fully me, people won't like me. And I didn't like myself in the first place. So that took a lot of work to deal with, like, why? And so it's kind of stemmed from the OCD. Like, I need to fix this about me, then I can be happy, then I can have friends, then I can have a relationship, then I can, all these things. But then when I eventually realized that this is what makes me me, and this is like, this is authentically me, to just be that person, like, not win, but like now I can be happy because I love the person I am. That's what makes me me. And so now I was able to walk with that slight like mindset change, which happened over like summer of 2023, summer I was saved, but the summer I also did a lot of deep reflection. I was able to look at myself in the mirror, love that person, and realize, hey, my fear that people might not like me because I like this or I do this or I have like OCD, I was like, no, the right people are going to love that person. The wrong people, right? If someone knows this about me and they don't like me, okay, well then what? Like you said, then what? Well, then they won't be friends with me. Well, then what? Well, I don't want people in my life who don't like the person I am really to be in my life. So one of those huge fears you break down, and I mean, that sounds pretty simple the way I just said it, but that took months. Mm-hmm. That took months of like reflection to like dive back into the past and dive back into why I was doing things. Like, why was I going to the gym? To prove people wrong. Well, why do I want to prove people wrong? How that's a negative thing to be driven by. I like to say sometimes you can use those negative whys, repurpose them, understand them, and still use them a little driving factors, but they can't be what drive you because it's not healthy. Sure. So that's just like a little example from my life.
And it's a practice, dude. It's a practice. And you're going to, it's not something that's just, it's mastered and it goes away. Like, I still have fear in my life. I still experience times where I'm like, okay, why am I nervous about this? Why am I scared to do this? Why do I have this feeling? Like, it's just, you just practice breaking down the problem, right? And you just get better at problem solving, right? That's one of my biggest things. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever received. And I know you're going to ask me this, at some point. I don't know if you want me to save it.
No, let's hear it. Let's hear it. So I work in a few questions into every episode. That's the goal. Not all of them every time. Mm-hmm. But one of them is like, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? So he kind of knew that was coming, but I do want to hear it now, like into the flow. So let's hear it.
I'm losing my train of thought.
No, you're good. I'll keep talking. So so we have a few questions, but one of them being that. But the other one, because it's on this subject of fear, I'll let it come back to him. But basically, like we talk about adversity, I like to get open and honest about the things people have faced and what they're comfortable sharing, because I think that's part of what makes a podcast, makes content so good. And I know you're already vulnerable, but what's kind of the toughest adversity you faced in your life? How have you seen that, like, kind of, do you look at it in a positive light now? Like, how has that influenced you? The
adversity part is huge because, I look at adversity as an opportunity every time. That's how I look at it. I just kind of reframed and rewired it, to understand that something greater is going to come on the other side of this challenge, right? Working through it and avoiding it gets me further away. I don't gain anything from avoiding something. You don't gain anything. You're
pushing into your subconscious and it's going to come back to bite you.
Exactly. So it's almost like what we talked about earlier. Like you become undisciplined and you break that that promise to yourself that, you know, when adversity comes, I avoid it. And as a kid, I've always been hyper aware, almost turning into a full-on empathetic person, because I'm always actively watching my surroundings, because I came from a very toxic, abusive, you know, environment as a kid. So I was, my natural state was to always study what was going on around me, where I could feel safe. So where I could feel safe, where was a space or energy or people that I could be, where I was okay, where I didn't have to be like, what's going on around me? You know, is someone going to pop off, or is there going to be, you know, violence, yelling, whatever it may be, right? So from a young age, I was just super hyper aware of things, of everything going on around me. And because of that, I understood that, you know, when people are faced with adversity in situations and they're not handled correctly, lots of bad things happen. Like that was my you know, kind of like my study as a kid. It's like nothing good comes from avoidance and you know, not being able to handle the adversity. So every time there was adversity, I was like, you know what, like it is what it is. Like we can't avoid it. It's going to keep happening. Yeah. You know, we need to learn how to live with it. We need to learn how to, you know, look at these as opportunities to grow, because if not, we're going to constantly run away from adversity, and it's inevitable. In everything you do, there's going to be adversity no matter what. You don't, you know, just have these skills and, you know how to run a podcast when you started out. You just don't have everything kind of like handed to you. And I've, you know, from the hard way, you know, you kind of just get used to things being hard. And from the second I was born, things were hard. So that was kind of like where Pivot comes from. Ooh. It comes from Good Players Adjust, because adversity is inevitable. No matter what you do, no matter where you live, no matter who you are, how much money you make, like there's always adversity in everything. It might be different from other people's, and I can guarantee it's going to be different, but it still feels the same. Yeah,
I like to say, like, everyone has different cards they're dealt. It's just like one person's cards don't invalidate someone else's cards, because your hardest thing is probably equivalent in their mind. Like, everyone's hardest thing is equivalent to the other person's hardest thing. So it's like they don't invalidate each other, but it's like we've talked about this. I remember specifically talking about this on the run we took after our lift at Gold's, and it's like, you're the one, you know? You're the one who changed those patterns, because you could have very easily saw your childhood and played victim, right?
Sure.
But it's like you, between your whole life, just like your whole life, and using that adversity as your childhood growing up, like kind of the things you saw, but becoming super hyper aware of like every situation. One, you turn that into a positive. You probably can use that in like looking at social situations, looking at sales calls, like all those things. You can use all those small things that you've picked up over the years. But on top of that, you saw it as, no, like, I don't want that for my future kids. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my relationships. And now it's like that really bad thing that a lot of people might have seen as a victim. It's like, no, I'm going to be the one that changes like our financial destiny. My family name's financial destiny. I'm going to be the one that changes my kids' lives, and I know exactly how they're going to live. My future relationship, how it's going to be. It's going to be a committed relationship. It's going to be, you know, make that commitment, that vow when you get up there. It's going to be like, this is the thing that no matter what happens, I'm committed to this relationship. And that's one of the biggest things I think with marriage, biblical marriage. I've been listening to a lot of J.P. Pokludas, who's like a young adults pastor, but he talks about like, how do you know if you find the one, right? And it's like, well, there is no one. It's like that you guys, you find like a God-fearing woman, you find someone of equal, like of, you know, has the same foundations, and that you commit to that person. Because he's like, you're always going to, like, everyone's like, what if I find someone better? It's like, yeah, you're probably going to come across someone better, someone more compassionate, someone more kind, someone that fits a little bit better. But that's not what makes a relationship a relationship. What makes a relationship is that you find this person and that you commit with everything that you'll be with them till the end of time, until whenever that is. And so I think, but that all to say, like, you're the one who's changing that foundation and using that adversity for the positive, and you're using that pain as power.
Yeah,
so
it's been, you know, like you said, either a victim or, you know, I can utilize it as, you know, as a skill.
A hero.
A hero. I looked at my life and I was like, well, I know what not to do, basically. You know what I mean? Which is good. That's
good.
basically like a blueprint of, you know, maybe I don't have what to do, but like I can utilize that to avoid things. Yeah, exactly. Like you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't make me feel this. Like, and so I took that, and that was my blueprint from my childhood. It was like, I know what not to do. So I didn't have a real, you know, solid foundation when it comes to like communication skills or, you know, business, like just the things that you really want in life to have, or that are really valuable at this point in your life when you're 28 years old and, you know, starting a business and you live in Tampa, Florida. Like there's a lot of things that you really want to have, but these things were developed, you know, over time with just understanding like, okay, I don't have these skills, but I want them. Right. And so that was a main driver for me, you know, as I was getting into a relationship, when I was starting business, was like, okay, I don't know how to do this. And I was cool with that.
Yeah.
I've always been cool with not knowing. I think that was one of my strengths, was like, dude, I'm cool with being at the bottom. You know, I'm cool with, you know, being the slowest. I'm cool with being, you know, not understanding something, but I know that
ask the questions.
Yeah. I'm going to be resourceful. You know, I'm going to ask the people around me like, hey, you know, do you have any ideas on this? Any tips on this? Hey, can you help me out? Like, I literally just posted on my story just now, like, hey, does anybody want to shoot today at 4:30? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of people aren't cool.
Willing to be like, oh, I can't find that person.
Sure.
You know, a lot of people might not post that.
You don't realize how much strength it shows to be able to ask for help.
Yeah.
And it's hard, especially as men. Like, we don't ask for help. And being able to say, you know what, I can't do this on my own right now. Can you help me? Says more about you, and it helps you more than trying to figure it out yourself and creating more stress and probably not being able to solve it, procrastinating, you know, just not getting it done versus asking for help. And I think that was something that, you know, I didn't do very well when I was a kid because I didn't know how, but I learned very quickly in my business adventures and bodybuilding and things of that nature where I was going, that if I didn't know something, it's probably better to ask somebody that does know than trying to figure it out myself, because it would prolong processes and it would take a lot longer. And that's how I feel like I've been able to get to where I'm at right now, is not by myself.
No,
dude,
not at all.
You think I got here by myself, bro? I'll tell you right now. When I started Pivot, when I had an idea that I wanted to do a clothing brand, which I actually had the idea when I was in high school, but me and my best friend had the idea to start a clothing brand. And my buddy Matt Sequelli, he had a clothing brand, and he lived in Austin, and we like would work out sometimes together. I met him through there. I was like, dude, your clothes are cool and whatnot. And I was wearing some of his clothes, and you know, we were just good friends. And I was like, Matt, like, I want to start my own clothing brand. And he literally gave me all of his manufacturers that he uses, taught me how to, like, not taught me, but like gave me the blueprint on how to like order, like, what do I say, what do I do, and like, what do I ask for. That was the start of Pivot versus somebody that tries to just get into it and is like, you know, I'm going to YouTube some stuff and like, hopefully I get the right information. You know, I went straight to somebody that was doing it already, and he gave me all the info.
Yeah, and it's someone that you like resonate with, you're good friends with. It's not like, because a lot of the time when people, so like I'll relate to your coaching. So if people are following you for a year, they're going to want to get coached by you. They don't want an online coach. They want to get coached by you because they know you. And it's like, so if you can find someone who's doing the thing you're doing that you're close with, that's a mentor or a friend, and they can help you out, it's like most of the time, good-hearted people want to help others out. Like that's why a lot of people are doing what they're doing. But two, it's going to resonate more with you coming from him. And so, yeah, just like, I think that's just like so cool to see, putting your ego down. And it took me so long, because I remember specifically in my life growing up through high school, I don't know why my like, whatever it was, my belief system was, I know a lot. Like, and I was like, I look back at it and it's so funny.
I know a lot.
No, like I was like always right. And like my parents would say it, and they're like, you're always right. Like you have a lot of knowledge for whatever. But the thing is I'd also seen that growing up, was like, my dad, he thinks he's right a lot. And so we would butt heads so much, because it was like, I always saw that now I did it. Like I was right. I knew more than I thought I knew. And it was so ignorant of me at that time to think I knew that much. And I don't know, like I kind of saw that. I don't know when I recognized it or what, but really when I started learning so much, when I started growing so much, when I started reading books, and so Be Useful, 7 Tools for Life, it's right here. But that he talks about at the very end of his book, Arnold, he's like, everyone says you're a self-made man, Arnold. Like, how did you do it? And he's like, I'm the furthest thing from a self-made man. He's like, someone sponsored my trip over here for bodybuilding. Someone helped me get started in the movie business. Someone helped me get into politics. He's like, and then he lists like probably 20 people that he writes little like excerpts about, like, thank you for this, this, and this. And then, but then he lists like another couple, like 50 people after that. And it's like, I'm nothing. I don't want to be a self-made man. I'm not a self-made man. And there's very few people who can really claim to be self-made. And I really think why would you want to do it on your own?
Right.
And
that's limiting. That's limiting.
It's very limiting.
You're limiting yourself to only one way of life and one perspective. If you and that's the thing, is like the ego death has to happen for a man to reach his true potential. Like, it has to happen at some point, whether it's I know everything, or, I know how to operate in a relationship, I'm good at business, whatever it is. In all those areas, there needs to be what I call an ego death. It needs to happen.
Dying to self, in a sense.
It has to, because not only does that open up opportunity and perspective for you to receive other knowledge and other views on things, it helps you take those, learn, and be able to apply that to your life in a way that's going to help you. Because if you're just trying to do everything yourself, if you only could read one book, you know what I mean? If you can only read one book for the rest of your life, like, you're going to be very limited on your tools. Yeah. Right. And that was something for, relationships, which I'm huge on, just because, I believe that's one of the main reasons we're here, is to first of all, be with a partner, number one, and then to connect with other people. Right. And to help other people, to help each other. And we can't do that if we
selfless. It's a selfless relationship. And Proverbs 18:22 says, whoever finds favor with the Lord, he finds a wife, or whoever finds a wife finds favor with the Lord. It's something to that extent. And it's like, seriously, that message just says and it's also taking so much, because I think a lot of people go into relationships, we're so similar. It's like, no, you got to utilize the differences and realize we're different for it to ever work.
Yeah, and if you want to dive into relationships at this point, we can totally do.
We're gonna dive in.
Yeah, because this what I feel like, this is like my wheelhouse, because there's not what I have with Shannon, and she is an incredible person. She's been everything that I never thought that I needed. Yeah. Right, and has helped me grow in ways that I never knew I could grow. And become a person that I never thought I could become, right? And I feel like this is, what I love talking about the most, because there's not a lot of men that get to this point in a relationship. Even if a man's married to his wife for 40, 50 years, that's great, but there's still an untapped space in their relationship of vulnerability, connection, depth that I feel like Shannon and I have been able to reach, through the trials of life, right? Through being able to forgive, right? Being able to talk about really, really hard things, that, you don't feel comfortable even thinking about, but you're able to share that with somebody, and they see you for the truest form, right? Gives you guys the ultimate level of trust. Yeah. And it's you don't see it a lot. You don't see it a lot in life. There's a lot of, healthy relationships, but the divorce rate's very high.
It's over half, I think.
It's over 50%.
Over 50%. Number one reason being infidelity, and number two being finances. Yep. And I just want to hit this, but I see you when you start talking about relationships, and Shannon, who I've met, she's amazing. Mm-hmm. But you just light up, and and it's so cool. But
I love love, dude. Yeah. And there's nothing there's nothing on this planet that feels remotely close to sharing this planet with your partner. When you guys,
in the way that you do, because some people don't get to do it the same way. Equally yoked. Equally yoked. And dude, I want to just emphasize how important it is, because you said, someone could be married for 40 and 50 years and not experience anything near what you're experiencing, because you're able to be so open and vulnerable. I don't want to speak for you in a relationship. I just no. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, but it's you're be able to open up about things you're man, that's uncomfortable for me to think about, because that's how you really build that vulnerability and that trust, is being open.
You want me to share? You kind of share some kind of experiences that that we would talk about that was really uncomfortable. there was a point, in my bodybuilding career where I was getting way more attention than I ever thought I was going to because my physique was so cool.
Yeah.
Right. And that, I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
I was so sick.
It was really cool. And I was
yeah.
posting it a lot. Right. And because like, also it was giving me clients. And so like,
that's how it goes. When you're a coach, like, hey,
sure.
If you're more shredded, you look better, you have those cuts,
100%.
You're going to get more business.
100%. So I was doing that. I was getting a lot of attention. Right. And, Shannon and we didn't have this level of trust at this point. Right. We'd been together for maybe a year and a half. And I say that, after 1 year, like that's when, stuff gets really, you got to get to depths. Like you can be excited and, in the honeymoon phase for a full year, for a full 12 months. Right. But after that first year and you kind of roll over to the next one, that's when things get real. It's like, okay, I'm experiencing this, like, are you going to talk about this? Do things get swept under the rug? Like how big is that rug going to pile up? How many things like that? And like, all of a sudden that's what happens when you get into big fights. It's because you have built up.
It's built up and that small thing triggers like a huge fight. And it's like, well, that's not really the problem.
Exactly. So again, from my childhood, I saw that there was no conflict that was handled in a healthy way. And so I didn't know how to handle conflict. I was actually scared of conflict, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I didn't want it. Nobody wants conflict, right? But I was terrified of it. But I knew that I had to somewhat overcome this because it was inevitable. Like we're come from two different backgrounds. She actually grew up extremely religious and she has a different experience with her whole entire life. And I come from a place where, if you had food on the table, like you were good. I come from a place where like you had a bed, you're okay.
Yeah.
So we have different ways of operating, right? When you put those two people together, of course there's going to be disagreements. Of course there's going to be conflict.
Any relationship, that's how it's going to be.
Even friendships, dude. Even if you and I were to live in this apartment together, we would butt heads, right? Because how you put away the dishes or how you put away food or like where you leave things, like it's just going to be different, right? It's going to be confusing. And that's all, and when you break it down, that's all that anger is confusion. Like, why would you do that? That makes me angry. It's just confusion. That's all it is. Anger is not even real. It's just confusion, right? And if you think about it, someone cuts you off in traffic, you're like,
why would you
do that? Like, you're not like, you're confused why somebody would drive in front of you.
And then you think about it and then you get mad.
That's where
confusion
anger
sparks anger.
Exactly. That's where anger comes from. So we would have these really, really like vulnerable, real conversations. I was like, hey, I don't know why I'm feeling this, but like I'm really liking the attention I'm getting from other females.
Yeah.
That's really hard to say to somebody you love.
Yeah.
You don't want to hurt them, and like how's that going to work? That was the type of dialogue we were having, at a younger thing. I was like, I don't know why I'm feeling this. I don't know what's happening with me right now, but like it makes me feel good. And I want to just like talk to you about it because I'm noticing that like it makes me feel good when I get a message from a female.
Yeah, not that I'll respond, not that anything, but I like the attention because what is it?
I don't know. I don't know,
yeah.
But I'm just sharing that with you because this is my experience as a human being on this planet right now. And I'm not defined by like me feeling something, but I just want you to know where I'm at and like what's going on. And that's the type of stuff that I'm dead serious of like, we've been able to work through and she's been able to help me with and understand that, I like attention, I didn't receive approval from my father. So I do like extra attention. I do like validation. I do like, when somebody tells me I look good or I'm doing well and I'm killing it because I didn't get that a lot, from the person that I was really looking to get it from.
Yeah.
I didn't have that. So when it comes in different ways and different little hits of dopamine, it makes me feel good, right? But it took us a long time to get there. But like to be able to have that like real conversation with her, with something like that was so taboo. Can you imagine like in a normal relationship, you saying that like it makes like I like getting attention from other girls?
Well, no, like, yeah, and I think
do you know what I'm saying?
The way you dive into it like makes sense. But like if someone was just to say that, like it takes that full level of like that unwavering commitment, knowing like, hey, I'm in this for the long run, and like the things that we share is like things we're gonna work through. And when you like are able to be open and honest, and then she can be like, okay, well, why? And then you start diving in, not like, oh, I'm mad, because at the end of the day, it's not like sometimes you feel things, and it's not like you're not trying to. It's not like you're responding to DMs, but
Yeah.
she can kind of be like, well, let's dive into it, and
Yeah.
not have like a quick, because a lot of females in relationships might have a quick like, what do you mean, or like, but just having, I think, the trust and the patience to understand. I think, because if that makes sense.
I'm coming at it from an angle of like, I'm not telling you this to hurt your feelings. I want to be with you for a very long time, and I don't want this to like build up or anything. So I'm just being honest with what I'm experiencing right now. Like it's that simple.
It's a weight off your chest as well.
It's that simple because you feel guilty about it anyway. Right? You know what I mean? And it's like, and if you could just get it out there and like, talk about things, like no matter what it is, like, hey, I have $30 in my bank account. You know what I mean? Like are you serious? That's hard to say.
Someone, yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, again, those are the type of things that we've been able to share with each other, to help each other. We're not here to as a partner, we're here to
it's not
work
just,
as a unit.
Yeah, it's not all positive. I think a lot of people think relationships are all positive and all this.
That's why I say after that first year, it gets serious, because it's really easy for it to be all positive on the first year. For 6 months, you're in love. It's still, you don't live together or whatever. Even if you don't live together into the second year, but like that's when things start you really are able to see like who a person is when you get into that second year of commitment. And it's like, how do you handle the way that you're feeling? How do you handle the conflict? How do you handle a disagreement? Are you working towards resolution? Are you working towards being right? Are you working towards, making yourself feel good about being right? Like there's a whole another level of communication that needs to be developed right when you get to year 2, because year 1, it's like you're texting all day, you're sending pictures.
You want to hang out with them all the time.
Exactly. And it's like,
that's great until it's not that.
Until reality hits. Until you're over that super high dopamine. You come down back to, your baseline, and you're like, I'm choosing you every day.
Yeah.
That's what love is. Love is a choice.
Love is a choice.
It's a choice every single day.
It's not a feeling.
And that's what you say, like fidelity, and unloyalty is one of the biggest reasons why people, and I know like I talk about this stuff, forever, because I love this stuff. That's one of the biggest things, that causes relationships to fail.
What is the number one? Infidelity and like cheating on your partner or any source of, like sort of that is the number one reason for divorce.
And that comes as a byproduct of poor communication in a space not to be able to have conversation about what you're experiencing. Yeah. It doesn't just happen like, oh, you know what? And then this thing, nothing just happens just because. It's all building up to a specific point. Let's circle back to my childhood, right? Yeah. My dad didn't walk out on me because he wanted to walk out on my family. My father walked out on my family because he didn't know how to handle adversity, and he had programmed himself when adversity hits, he runs. So when adversity came and whatever happened, the day that he was like, I can't do this anymore. He wasn't saying, I'm going to walk out on this family because I hate this family.
He subconsciously went to what he knew.
Bingo. That's what happens. And same thing with cheating.
Because he never dealt with this stuff. Same thing with like, okay. Bingo. So infidelity, we'll start with infidelity. So like 1, communication, but 2, so I'm reading a book called A Covenant with Your Eyes, or With My Eyes. So it talks about sex, sexuality, sexual immorality, and so it's talking about that. So it's like 1, communication 100%, but 2, this day and age that we live in, like just the lust that drives this generation and how like pushed it is. Oh man, it's like 1 is desensitizing people to sex. 2, people aren't pleased in their sexual lives because they're engaging in pornography, they're engaging in all these things that, man, they're literally straight like the devil gets enjoyment if you're watching porn because he knows it's going to ruin your future relationship. And for dude, it's such a hard thing to deal with as just this generation. And so, but basically the whole book, I'm only halfway through, but I think it's making a covenant, which is a written or formal agreement with God about your eyes, that you won't like lustfully look, or like if it, like, I don't know, I'm not done with it yet. Yeah. But it's like those 2 things deep root subconsciously, like, he talks about if you like gaze one way and then you look back, like you determined on that second look, like that you lustfully are looking at someone, and it's just like those two things combined. I could talk about them for. I want to finish this book, but
yeah, it takes a lot of practice for that to happen because it's natural to it.
It's a natural instinct. Yeah,
It's natural. Any species, you look at any species, on the planet, they watch each other. Any species, lions, bears, they sit there and watch each other. They look at each other, right? And that's normal in our society as well. In our in the human race as well, but it's to what degree, right? It's that's when you put the intention on it, right? It's like you said, double taking. If you can practice not double taking consciously, that's a win. Like that's a real thing that you don't realize. Again, nothing happens just cause, right? These are things that we are programming ourselves, right? Double take. That'll lead to a response on a DM. That'll lead to a text message. That'll lead to it all leads to something, right? So you got to be hyper aware of what could happen. If I make this decision, just ask yourself, in those situations where you feel, like guilt, you feel like shame, right? Like, what happens if I do this? Like, what could this lead to? What positive comes from this? And if you can't really answer that question honestly, you probably need to practice doing the opposite.